So what I was about to say, having said that we've had a boost again today, what can we do about it? And Jessica, who's from the JNCC, because I must really get that wrong.
Joint Nature Conservation Committee.
Thank you.
The UK's Nature Conservation Agency, basically.
Okay, so that's a government-based agency, part of DEFRA.
Yeah, we are an arm's length body, as they call it, funded by DEFRA.
Yep. So Jessica's with us today, principally to tell us that life is still available for the UK. The last call for this round of life is open.
Yeah.
And proposals are encouraged. I don't want to ask what deadlines are. Please do not mention deadlines. I've had enough deadlines in the last few weeks. So, you know, I'm glad to see some colleagues coming to hear about this, because this LIFE programme has something to offer. For the right project, I think it's a great way of getting a collaborative project together within Europe. And I will leave Jessica to explain what happens to our ability to participate in LIFE after the end of this year. So I'm going to shut up and let Jessica tell us about LIFE.
Thank you very much, Martin. Yes, my name is Jessica Magnus. I'm the national contact point for EU LIFE funding in the UK. As I said, we are based in Peterborough at the Joint Nature Conservation Committee, which is a government agency mainly advising the UK governments on nature conservation and biodiversity. There. This is an overview of what I will be talking about. You know, Martin has already alluded to the legibility of in the 2020 call. I will give some background, general background on what the LIFE programme is about, covering the priorities and objectives of the programme. We will look at what has LIFE done in the UK, and then we go into the more nitty-gritty, how to apply for funding and what is co-financing looking like. I will also cover the application process and our specific services we offer as a national contact point. So the good news is LIFE is still happening in 2020, and the UK government has recently confirmed that UK organisations can continue to bid into the LIFE programme in the 2020 call, even if the call timetable stretches into 2021 and beyond the transition period. And successful projects will have their funding guaranteed for the lifetime of the project. So even if the project runs for 5 or potentially 7 years, your funding will be guaranteed. Or just saying the sad news is that the government has also confirmed that the UK will not associate to the LIFE programme. The LIFE regulation offers an option for third countries outside the EU to associate to the programme, but the government has decided that the UK will not use that option, and they will try to set up a national fund instead to replace LIFE fund nationally. So just to reiterate, this 2020 is really the last chance to get some money from the LIFE programme. Just to go back and give some background on the LIFE programme. So LIFE is the EU's primary financial instrument for the environment, and the overall objective is to contribute to the implementation and development of EU environmental and climate policy and legislation. So the program co-funds environment and resource efficiency projects, nature and biodiversity projects, climate action projects, and governance and information projects. I will go into this in more detail in a while. But in general, the priority topics cover the whole length and breadth of the environment, including water, floods, marine, coastal management, waste, resource efficiency, soils, forests, noise, urban environment, air pollution, air quality, and nature and biodiversity. So the whole lot, basically. It's a very broad program, covering the whole of the environment. Since its creation in 1992, LIFE has been through different funding cycles, and the current program has been running from 2014 and will end of this year in 2020 with a budget of 3.4 billion euros. So in comparison to some of the other funds like Interreg and Horizon 2020, or even looking at agricultural funding, LIFE is a tiny pot of money, but it is critical for the environment because it is the only fund available to fund environmental projects. So over 5,000 projects have been funded by the LIFE program across the EU, worth over 6 billion euros. In the UK, largely a government agency or local authorities, universities and larger NGOs have been accessing the program. Here's an overview of the overall objectives of the program, and they include the contribution to a resource-efficient, low-carbon and climate-resilient economy, protecting and improving the environment, maintaining and improving biodiversity, and especially improving the Natura 2000 network, improving the development and implementation of EU environmental and climate policy, integrating and mainstreaming environmental and climate objectives into other policies, improving environmental and climate governance and information, and implementing the 7th Environmental Action Programme. Here's a schematic which gives you an overview of how the program is set up. So as I said, we have a budget of 3.4 billion for this current funding cycle. And within the program, we have 2 sub-programs. One is covering the environment, the other one is covering climate action. And under each of the programs, you have 3 different strands. Nature and biodiversity, environment and resource efficiency, and governance and information, sitting under the environment sub-program, and under climate action we have climate adaptation, climate mitigation, and climate governance and information. So if you have a project idea in mind, you have to fit it under one of these strands. You can't apply across the strands. It has to be either environment and resource efficiency or climate adaptation. You can't apply for both strands. I mean, you can have elements of climate adaptation in an environment and resource efficiency project, but it has to sit firmly under one of the strands. So down here I said we since 2018 we don't have a national allocation anymore. That means we are competing with all other applications across the other 27 member states across the whole of the EU. So it is a very competitive program, and only the best applications will get funded. I will briefly go through each of the separate strands and draw out the bits and pieces which are important to note under each of the different strands. So, for example, for nature and biodiversity projects, you will have to work on a project that supports the implementation of the Birds and Habitats directives. These projects typically take place in the Natura 2000 networks and can be best practice and character. Life Biodiversity supports projects which implement the EU's biodiversity strategy. They can take place outside Natura 2000 networks, but need to be more innovative than Life Nature. important for these type of projects is that you have to demonstrate that at least 25% of the project budget must be on concrete conservation measures. Here are some exemplar projects for nature and biodiversity. The More Life 2020 is one of the UK's biggest projects, life projects, with a budget of over 16 million, and they are restoring blanket bogs in the South Pennines Natura site. The second one, the Soir for Life project, is a Scottish project trying to reintroduce the wild cat into the Cairngorms National Park and across the wider Scottish Highlands. And that is run by Edinburgh Zoo and the Royal Society in Scotland. The last project here is the Futurescapes project, is a project run by RSPB promoting green infrastructure across 38 priority areas across the UK. Life, environment and resource efficiency is probably the strand which would be most interesting to all of you guys, because that strand is covering these 5 thematic priorities, including water, waste, resource efficiency, environmental health, air quality, chemicals, and so on. And the laser fence project was, sitting under this strand. These projects need to test innovative solutions to EU-wide environmental issues, and need to address one of these priority topics. So ERE projects need to be either pilot or demonstration in character, so they need to either test a technique or method that has not been applied or tested before to be a pilot project, or a methodology or approach that is new or unknown in the project-specific context, that is a demonstration project. Close-to-market projects are generally welcome for ERE projects, so you can advance your projects to make it close to market or market ready during the project phase, but you're not allowed to make a profit during the project phase, although it is welcome to see that a profit can be made once the project has finished and it goes into production and onto the market. I listed 2 exemplar projects for ERE projects. One is the Acumen project. It's an award-winning project which was run by the Environment Agency, and focus on assessing, capturing and utilizing methane from expired and non-operational landfill sites, reducing pollution and contamination. And the Climate Life Proofing Social Housing Landscape was a project which was run by Groundwork in London, an NGO in London, trying to climate-proof social housing estates in South London by implementing or undertaking adaptation measures around the retrofitting of blue and green infrastructures in social housing estates. Environmental and governance information projects are a slightly different type of project. They are focusing on awareness raising, on environmental measures, and support the communication, management and dissemination of environmental information. They also promote and contribute to more effective compliance and enforcement of environmental legislation. So this type of project, or this type of strand, covers 2 thematic areas. One is focusing on information and communication and awareness raising campaigns, and the other is focusing on activities in support of effective control processes as well as measures to promote compliance. So again, as I said initially, you have to pick one strand, one thematic topic, one project topic, and fit your project idea under this specific topic in the specific strand. Climate action covers climate mitigation, which primarily focuses on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and with an emphasis on energy-intensive industries and fluorinated greenhouse gases and land use change and forestry. Climate adaptation is aiming to increase the resilience to greenhouse gases with an emphasis on urban adaptation and sustainable management of water and drought-prone areas with or flood and coastal management. And climate governance and information, similar to the environment governance and information strand, is promoting actions to contribute towards to a shift towards a low carbon and resilient economy. So this was a whistle-stop tour across the LIFE regulation or the LIFE program, and I'm gonna now focus on what LIFE has done in the UK. And since 1992, LIFE has supported over 250 projects in the UK with an investment of over 260 million from the EU. The UK in general has been a very successful country in accessing LIFE money, and for the period 2014 to 2017, we were the most successful country in Europe to obtain LIFE funding. For example, in the 2019 call, we had a 50% success rate at stage 1 for with an overall average success rate of 36% for traditional LIFE projects. So in general, the UK submits a small number of high quality bids, and that's why we have quite a high success rate of getting projects through. But nonetheless, it is a very competitive program, and even a 36% success rate is quite low, in comparison to other funding streams. So the risk of, investing into writing an application and then not being successful is still quite high. So how are projects funded? It's a two-stage application process for environment projects. The climate projects follow a one-stage application process, so they need to submit the full application by the deadline, while environment projects have a two-stage application process, so you submit a concept note at stage 1, and then if that has been successful, you get invited to submit the full application at stage 2. The average project lasts between 3 to 5 years. A typical grant is around 2 to 5 million euros, and the co-financing rate is 55%. For specific projects in the nature and biodiversity strand, this can go up to 60 or even 65% if the projects are addressing priority species and habitats. So the co-financing tends to be quite a big problem for applications, because you will have to find the 45% of the remaining budget somewhere else from other sources, and that can be a big hurdle for applicants. Who can apply? Almost anyone except sole traders. Public and private bodies organisations registered in the EU, commercial organisations, in the UK, primarily UK government agencies and NGOs such as RSPB, universities and smaller businesses have been accessing the LIFE programme. The coordinating beneficiaries, so the lead partner needs to be based in the EU. Overseas territories and crown dependencies can be eligible, but they do have their own program, which is the BEST program, which is specifically designed to fund projects in the OTs. Activities can take place outside the EU, but must show that they're necessary to achieve the EU's environmental and climate objectives. And the average project has about 1 to 5 partners. So the application process it's an annual call, and the 2020 call is expected to be launched on the 2nd of April. You have to submit your applications to the European Commission via their online portal e-proposal. And as I've already said, it's a 2-stage application process for environment projects, with the submission of an 11-page concept note in June. We don't have the dates yet, but last year it was the 12th of June, so it's going to be the middle of June. So if your project is successful, you will be invited to proceed to stage 2 with the submission of a full application in January or February 2021. Climate project, as I've already said, follows the 1-stage application process. So if you're planning to submit a climate project, then you have to submit the full application by mid-September. To give you an idea about the time scales, in the 2019 call, climate projects were notified if they had been successful just last month in February. Environment projects had been notified last year in June if they had been successful, and then the grant agreements were signed in October last year. And so the earliest start date for a 2020 project is most likely to be sometime in July 2021, but that will have to be confirmed once the call comes out. So projects must show EU added value. That you have to remember it is an European funding stream, so you have to demonstrate how your project is helping to advance European policy and objectives. You have to demonstrate the project is innovative and applies and tests techniques and approaches that have not been used before. The projects need to be, sustainable in the long term. So it's a big investment by the European Commission. So they want to see that the results of the projects are carried forward even beyond the end of the project. Replicability and transferability is of big importance to LIFE projects. So you have to demonstrate how the project's results can be replicated and disseminated beyond the projects into other sectors, entities and regions, or even countries. Projects must show value for money, and quite importantly, LIFE does not fund research or large infrastructure items. It's also important for you to quantify objectives. You need to show a baseline, from the baseline from where you're working on towards, and to demonstrate what the successes will be by the end of the project, so the evaluator can see that the project has been a success. I've listed a few common pitfalls for applications, which in our experience are, the most common reasons why applications fail. Often there is no clear link to European environmental policy or objectives. You know, a lot of applications focusing purely on domestic agendas and objectives. The lack of quantified objectives, targets, and actions is a big problem for a lot of applications. They don't deliver a project topic. Applications don't have a baseline, so it's impossible for an evaluator to understand how the project will improve the situation. And for nature and biodiversity projects, there might be a lack of concrete conservation actions. So if you think the LIFE program is a fund you're interested in, what do you do? So make sure it is the appropriate funding instrument. As I've said, it doesn't fund research or monitoring, nor infrastructure projects. Set aside to read the guidance and the multi-annual work program. I have some copies here if you're interested. Take time to prepare. It takes quite a lot of time to put together an application. For the full application, we reckon it's between 6 to 9 months to write a good application. Even a concept note will still take a lot of time. And check if your project idea has been done before. The European Commission doesn't like to fund projects twice, so check the database if your project has been done before. As I've already said, a project must show long-term sustainability and lead to continued action. You need to focus your actions and your objectives and do not include actions which are unrelated to your project objectives. Identify match funding at an early stage. As I've said already, match funding is a big problem or stumbling block for application. And register with us, the UK LIFE NCP, to complete a concept note form. Seek our advice with specific questions. We are here to help. I'm just quickly to wrap up, highlight some of the support services we can offer. So I've said we are the national contact point since 2016. We are a small team of 3 people, but draw on expertise across the organization. We support applications and advice on the LIFE program, and in comparison, once projects have been funded, the Commission's monitoring team, NEMO, is taking over the monitoring of existing projects. We have a dedicated inbox and hotline, so you can contact us during office hours. We have a website where you can find quite a lot of information and guidance, the concept note template, pre-screening dates, webinars, and so on the website. We use Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook to announce critical dates, deadlines, information. There's a discussion forum on LinkedIn for any specific questions, and we run webinars. So these are the webinars scheduled for 2020. We haven't got all the dates yet, but the first one will be just after the call comes out in April. On the 22nd of April, we will run a webinar on the 2020 call, so save the date. We offer a concept note pre-screening service, so you can send us your draft applications and we provide feedback and advise you on how to improve your score. So normally, we're working backwards from the Commission's deadline, which will be some point in June, and then the pre-screening will be happening in May and June, in time for you to submit the concept notes to the Commission. We also offer a pre-screening service for climate projects for the full application during August and September. And then again, pre-screening service for the second stage application for environment projects in January 2021 if your concept note has been successful. There's an example of how the concept note looks, which is on our website, and it's modeled on the Commission's concept note. So this will be the template you will have to fill in if you're submitting a concept note. I've already said this, but you will have to submit the concept note or your applications via e-proposal to the European Commission. You can give the NCP access rights by ticking a box, so that it helps us to help you with the submission service, for example. And the recommended browsers for e-proposal are Firefox or Google Chrome. And finally, a list of recommended reading. It can be quite daunting to put together a live application, but there is information out there to help you. Read the multi-annual work program, which is listing all the priorities for the live program and project topics. The guidelines will be published on the 2nd of April, but we always recommend to use the last year's guidance because the guidance doesn't tend to change very much between years. So you could have a look at the 2019 guidance if you are interested in applying in 2020. Well, that concludes my talk on the live program. Thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?
Jessica, you mentioned the Natura 2000 network. Can you just explain what that is? Are you aware of it in the UK?
Yeah. Okay. The network is the Habitats and Birds directives are the nature directives of the European Commission, and also they apply in the UK. They have set up a network of protected sites, terrestrial and marine, for protecting habitats and birds. And it's a network of protected sites, basically. It's the world's biggest network of protected sites. So across the EU, I think about 15% of the EU's terrestrial surface has been designated for protected sites. So they're trying to make it a network of protected sites. So that's what it's called, Natura 2000.
An example would be the DS stream. Having looked it up for those. Any other questions?
That's very clear.
Sorry?
So you wrote that the on-route race projects can have 1 to 5 partners. Does it mean that there are projects with just one partner?
Yeah.
Just one single country? It is eligible.
Yeah. You don't have to have partners. It's not a requirement. I mean, the average project does have 1 to 5 partners, but you can have single organization applications. It's not a requirement to
Does
have
having
partners.
European partners a plus, an advantage?
Yeah, again, it's not a requirement to have European partners. You can gain up to 4 points, additional 4 points if you have a European partner during the evaluation phase. But it's not a requirement per se, not like in Interact where it's like a
So you say 4
requirement.
points, but for our, say, for our 10 or for our 100, how much is that? The gain of having a European partner, how much percentage you would get?
For extra points.
For
So
extra
yeah,
points,
for
how-
extra points.
How many?
You can get 50 points in the concept notes evaluation. But it really depends on the type of project. It must make sense for your project to have European partners, and partners as such. Some projects are fine to work by themselves and, might get more points. It all comes down to the kind of technical coherence of the project application. Yes?
So the co-financing comes from the institution itself, is it one partner or
Yeah, I mean that will be up to
to
the coordinating beneficiary, to the lead partner, to organize the match funding. So the commission will pay 55% of the project costs, but the rest you will have to find somewhere else. So some organizations have a pot stashed behind their sofas somewhere, and can pay the rest of the budget. Sometimes Heritage Lottery Fund, for example, they tend to co-fund some of the nature projects, or have co-funded some of our nature projects in the past. Some Welsh government, for example, they have different funds available for life funding. DEFRA might be able to fund some projects, so it really depends on the project.
or a company?
Or companies, yeah. For example, the Moor Life 2020 project, they got utilities to fund their work because they benefit by the, improved water quality. It's down to the project to organize funding.
So the match funding, does it have to be cash, or could that be like,
It can be staff time, it depends. If you're a public body, there's certain rules have to apply, what you can qualify, what qualifies as match funding. But in general, staff time does count, yeah. Anything where there's some kind of cash flow, even in terms of salaries and stuff, that will be eligible.
You've touched on the subject to where in running laser fence with our finance department, there's this 2% rule.
Yeah.
Can you briefly give us an idea? Because I think most of the people listening there are from universities, so they...
Yeah, the 2% rule.
Applications, we want to they need to understand, of course. Can you give a very summary of what that...
So the 2% rule applies to public bodies. Basically, Life doesn't want to pay permanent civil service or permanent staff, so it needs to be additional to the, 2% above the additional staff costs, basically. It's quite a tricky rule. But yeah, you will have to deal with that when you're at university. Well, it depends on the kind of setting up or your legal status. But I assume you're a public body.
Yes, we are. And I think whenever I think about it, I'm getting a little bit of a headache. But as I understand it, we have staff who are paid directly by the projects, but they're obviously contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't sort of just have match funding from salaried staff. You've got to have sort of 2% more
Yes.
in contract staff, so that you're not just sort of putting names down for match funding.
That's right. Yeah.
There's actually some real money going out to places.
Yeah, so they want to create these additional jobs. And yeah, as I said, the thinking behind it or the reasoning behind it is that the LIFE program doesn't want to pay for permanent civil servant or staff, so it has to be additional.
We have